I found another man's clothes in my wife's car trunk. The most devastating discoveries often happen during the most mundane tasks. You're helping your spouse with something routine, something that should strengthen your partnership and demonstrate care for each other, when suddenly you're confronted with evidence that destroys everything you believed about your relationship. Finding another man's clothes in your wife's car trunk isn't just evidence of infidelity. It's proof of calculated deception, systematic planning, and a level of disrespect that transforms your understanding of who your partner really is. When someone maintains a secret relationship to the extent that they're storing another person's clothing in their vehicle, it represents more than just physical betrayal. It demonstrates that your spouse has created an entirely separate life that requires logistical planning, careful timing, and ongoing deception. They're not just cheating. They're operating what essentially amounts to a covert operation that treats your marriage as an obstacle to overcome rather than a commitment to honor. I'm Derek, 29 years old, and I work as an accountant for a mid-sized firm in Charlotte. My wife Melissa and I have been married for 4 years, together for 6. She's 27 and works as a sales representative for a medical supply company, traveling occasionally within our region to meet clients and attend trade shows. We own a townhouse in a suburban development, have 2 dogs, and what I believed was a trusting marriage built on mutual respect and shared financial goals. Melissa drives a Honda CR-V that she uses for both her daily commute and work-related travel. It's a practical vehicle that suits her professional needs and our budget, with enough cargo space for her sample products and presentation materials. I drive an older sedan that works fine for my office commute, but isn't as reliable for longer trips. So we'd established a pattern where Melissa would take her car for any extended driving while I used mine for local errands and day-to-day transportation. Last Saturday morning, Melissa was getting ready to drive to her mother's house about 2 hours away to help with some home renovation projects. Her mother was redecorating her living room and had asked Melissa to bring some decorating magazines, paint samples, and a few tools that we had in our garage. It was the kind of family favor that seemed completely normal and supportive, and I was glad that Melissa maintained such a close relationship with her mother. "I'm going to load some stuff in my car," Melissa said after breakfast, gathering the magazines and paint samples we'd collected. "Mom wants to see those curtain ideas we found, and I promised to bring Dad's old drill set since theirs is broken." I offered to help carry things to her car, particularly the heavier toolbox and some fabric samples that were awkward to manage. Melissa seemed slightly hesitant about my assistance, claiming she could handle everything herself, but I insisted since the drill set was quite heavy and I wanted to make sure it was securely positioned so it wouldn't slide around during her drive. We walked out to her car together, with me carrying the toolbox and Melissa managing the lighter decorating items. She opened the rear hatch of her CR-V to reveal a cargo area that was mostly empty except for her usual work materials, product brochures, a small cooler for client lunches, and her emergency roadside kit. I placed the toolbox in the back corner of the cargo area and was arranging it to make sure it wouldn't shift during the drive when I noticed something that didn't belong. Partially hidden under a car blanket that Melissa kept for emergencies was what appeared to be a piece of men's clothing, specifically a dress shirt that was definitely not mine. "Whose shirt is this?" I asked, pulling back the blanket to get a better look. The shirt was a light blue button-down, size large, and made from expensive-looking fabric. It was wrinkled as if it had been worn and then hastily stored, and it had a subtle cologne scent that I didn't recognize. Melissa's reaction was immediate and telling. Her face went pale, her eyes widened with what looked like panic, and she quickly moved toward the back of the car as if to block my view of whatever else might be hidden there. "I don't know," she said, her voice higher than usual and carrying a forced casualness that sounded completely unconvincing. "Maybe it's something from work. One of my clients might have left it in my car after a presentation or something." But the explanation didn't make sense. Melissa's job involved selling medical supplies to healthcare facilities, not the kind of work environment where clients would be removing their shirts or leaving personal clothing in her vehicle. Besides, the shirt was hidden under a blanket rather than sitting openly where someone might have accidentally left it. I lifted the blanket completely and discovered additional items that made Melissa's work-related explanation impossible to believe. There was a man's tie that matched the shirt, a pair of dress socks, and most damning of all, a pair of men's underwear. This wasn't a client's accidentally forgotten clothing. This was a complete change of clothes that someone had deliberately stored in my wife's car. "Melissa," I said, holding up the tie and looking directly at her, "clients don't leave their underwear in sales representatives' cars. What is this really?" She opened her her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, clearly struggling to come up with an explanation that might make this discovery seem innocent. But there was no innocent reason for another man's complete outfit to be hidden in her vehicle. The cologne scent was particularly disturbing because it was strong and recent, suggesting these clothes had been worn recently and stored in her car within the past few days. This wasn't old clothing that had been forgotten. These were clothes that someone had needed to remove and hide, probably because they couldn't take them home for reasons related to concealing an affair. "I need you to tell me the truth right now," I said, setting down the clothing and looking at Melissa with what I hoped was a calm but serious expression. "Whose clothes are these, and why are they hidden in your car?" Melissa looked around our driveway, as if hoping to find an escape route, then back at me with tears starting to form in her eyes. The panic in her expression had shifted to something that looked like resignation, as if she understood that her secret had been discovered and there was no plausible explanation that would make this situation acceptable. "Derek, I can explain," she said, though her voice suggested she had no idea how to actually explain finding another man's complete outfit hidden in her car. "Then explain," I said, "because right now it looks like you've been helping someone change clothes in your car and then hiding the evidence." The silence that followed lasted only about 30 seconds, but it felt endless. Melissa stood there looking at the ground, occasionally glancing up at me and then away again, clearly trying to decide whether to continue lying or admit to whatever had been happening. "It's not what you think," she finally said, which is exactly what someone says when it's precisely what you think. "What I think is that you've been having an affair with someone who needs to change clothes in your car because he can't go home wearing what he wore to meet you," I said. "Is that not what's happening?" Melissa's tears started flowing more freely, and she nodded slightly without making eye contact. The admission was devastating, but not surprising given what I discovered. The hidden clothing wasn't just evidence of physical infidelity. It was proof of systematic planning and logistical coordination that demonstrated how extensively she'd been deceiving me. "How long?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I actually wanted to know the answer. 3 months, she whispered. 3 months of systematic deception. 3 months of secret meetings that required clothing changes and careful timing. 3 months of maintaining an elaborate double life, while coming home to me every evening and pretending to be a committed wife. "Who is he?" I asked. "Someone from work," she said, still not looking at me directly. "A client who became more than a client." The work connection explained the travel opportunities and the reasons why their meetings might need to be conducted discreetly. If he was a married client, they would both have reasons to be extremely careful about concealing their affair, including the need to change clothes before returning to their respective spouses. "So when you've been traveling for work, you've actually been meeting him," I said, trying to understand the full scope of her deception. "Not always," she said, "but sometimes. And sometimes he would meet me here locally, and we'd go somewhere together." The logistics were becoming clearer and more disturbing. Melissa had been using her work-related travel as cover for affair meetings, and she'd also been conducting local meetings that required one or both of them to change clothes afterward to avoid detection by their spouses. "Today," I said, suddenly understanding why she'd been hesitant about my help with loading her car. "You're not going to your mother's house, are you?" She shook her head, confirming that even this morning's plans had been a lie. While I'd been helping her prepare for what I believed was a family visit, she'd actually been getting ready for another secret meeting with her affair partner. The realization that I'd been actively assisting with her preparations for cheating on me was particularly painful. I'd carried tools and materials to her car, helped arrange everything carefully, and wished her a safe drive to what I thought was a family obligation. Instead, I'd been unknowingly facilitating another betrayal. "Melissa," I said, trying to process the full extent of what I'd discovered, "you've been systematically lying to me for 3 months. You've been using work travel as cover for affairs, lying about family visits, and storing another man's clothes in your car. This isn't a mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. This is a deliberately constructed secret life." She tried to respond, but I continued before she could speak. "The planning involved in maintaining this affair, coordinating schedules, finding places to meet, arranging for clothing changes, creating cover stories, demonstrates that you've been prioritizing this relationship over our marriage for months." Melissa attempted to minimize the significance of what had been happening by claiming that she'd been confused about her feelings and hadn't known how to handle the situation. But the evidence suggested otherwise. Someone doesn't maintain elaborate logistical systems for secret meetings if they're simply confused about their emotions. "I need you to call him right now and end it," I said, "in front of me. And then you need to decide whether you want to try to rebuild our marriage or whether you want to continue this affair." Melissa made the phone call, though it was brief and didn't provide much detail about the nature of their relationship or her commitment to ending it. After hanging up, she promised that the affair was over and begged me to give her another chance to prove that she was committed to our marriage. But trust, once destroyed by months of systematic deception, can't be rebuilt through promises and apologies. How could I believe anything she told me about her work travel, her family visits, or her daily activities? How could I know whether she was actually ending the affair or just being being more careful about concealing it. I told Melissa that she needed to find somewhere else to stay while I decided whether our marriage could survive this level of betrayal. The discovery of another man's clothes in her car had revealed not just an affair, but a pattern of elaborate deception that made me question everything I thought I knew about her character and our relationship. Over the following days, additional details emerged that made the situation even worse. I learned that Melissa had been lying not just about her affair activities, but about legitimate work travel as well. She'd been claiming business trips that didn't exist, creating fake client meetings as cover for personal time with her affair partner, and basically using her job as a comprehensive alibi system for maintaining her secret relationship. The affair partner was indeed a married client, which explained why they'd needed to be so careful about their logistics. Both of them had marriages to protect, which had led to the elaborate systems of clothing changes, secret meeting locations, and carefully coordinated schedules that I discovered. Melissa moved in with a friend while we attempted to work through the aftermath of her affair, but the marriage counseling sessions revealed that she'd been unhappy in our relationship for much longer than the 3-month affair timeline suggested. The affair had been a symptom of deeper problems rather than the cause of our marital issues. 6 months later, we decided to divorce. The trust issues were insurmountable, and Melissa admitted that she'd realized during counseling that she didn't want to do the work necessary to rebuild our marriage. She wanted to continue exploring her options, which essentially meant she wanted to continue the affair without the complication of being married to me. The divorce proceedings were relatively straightforward since we didn't have children and had maintained separate financial accounts for most purchases. Melissa's affair partner had ended his own marriage around the same time, so they were able to pursue their relationship openly once both divorces were finalized. Looking back on the experience, I'm grateful that I discovered Melissa's affair when I did, rather than continuing to live in ignorance while she maintained her secret life indefinitely. The hidden clothing in her car was devastating evidence, but it also provided undeniable proof of systematic deception that made denial impossible. I learned valuable lessons about paying attention to changes in behavior and trusting my instincts when something feels wrong. Melissa's increased secrecy about her work travel, her reluctance to accept help with loading her car, and her defensive reactions to casual questions about her activities were all warning signs that I'd initially dismissed. I'm in a relationship now with someone who values honesty and transparency above everything else. We've discussed the importance of open communication about work relationships, travel plans, and any situations that might create opportunities for inappropriate connections with other people. The most important lesson I learned is that affairs requiring elaborate logistical planning, secret clothing storage, fake business trips, coordinated schedule manipulation reveal fundamental character issues rather than momentary relationship problems. When someone is willing to construct comprehensive deception systems to maintain infidelity, they're demonstrating priorities and values that are incompatible with marriage. That Saturday morning, when I helped Melissa load her car, taught me that sometimes the most helpful gesture becomes the moment that reveals the truth about your relationship. In trying to assist with what I thought was a family obligation, I discovered evidence that my wife had been living a completely separate life for months. The discovery of another man's clothes hidden in her car wasn't just proof of an affair. It was evidence of a level of systematic deception that made saving our marriage impossible and showed me that I deserved a partner who wouldn't need to hide intimate relationships in car trunks.